You started this by saying, how can we meet menopause in a better way? Well, we don't need to meet it. We can actually mitigate against it.
And this is what I love about speaking to you because the menopause conversation isn't about decline. This is about an invitation for you to become the strongest, most vital person you can be.
Yes. And guess what? When you do balance the body's energies, it sorts itself out. You only have to make one or two tweaks and everything else falls into play. Sleep improves, cognitive function improves, your ability to exercise improves, your relationships improve. So the body finds balance once you get those highways sorted out.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to MenoPositive. Today has got to be one of my favorite topics. It is one of the main reasons I created the show. I believe most other conversations around menopause are about managing symptoms. So only once you're in it. The conversation has been reduced to hormones and symptoms. Instead, I want you to ask yourself a more important question. How are you going to show up to one of the most important transitions of your life? What kind of body are you bringing into it? Your energy, your resilience, your ability to feel strong, clear, in control. Today, I'm joined by longevity and human optimization physician, Dr. Ash Kapoor, who brings over 30 years of wisdom, warmth, and innovation for us to explore how we can prepare our bodies for the menopause transition. We're going to uncover why menopause isn't always the root problem, what actually moves the needle, beyond supplements, HRT, or quick fixes, and how to build a body that can support you in the lead up to menopause and beyond. Now, before we start, can you do me the honor of hitting the follow button? I know everybody asks, but it really does make a big difference. Dr. Ash Kapoor, welcome to MenoPositive.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
We are all living longer,
Yes.
which means women are going to spend more than half, probably, or almost half their life in menopause. How can we ensure that those years are in good health and not in decline?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we have to think about what do we mean by menopause. The word pause suggests that everything just stops. And we just assume that that is okay. Now, living in the world we live in today with technology and understanding, we realize that hormones don't just stop, they decline over a period of time. And one of the things we've now begin to understand is that you can accelerate that loss. So hormones are there for life, not just for menopause and andropause. They're this where we have to manage them during our whole lives and our whole existences. We're seeing conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis, infertility. These are simply imbalances in hormones in early life. And why do we have these imbalances? Well, hormones are also a source of energy. And if we're running out of fuel, the body will borrow it. And when the body borrows it, it declines. And the balances go out of sync. And that's when problems occur. So, what we have to do is be mindful that this is a lifelong journey. And if we want to mitigate against some of the risks of menopause, we need to start thinking about this much earlier in context of what we do and the worlds we live in.
Like, you seem to approach this differently. As I said, I think the menopause conversation has been reduced to hormones and
Yeah.
symptoms, but you look at it very differently. So how do you view this transition when a woman comes to you?
Yeah. Well, I've grown up in the traditional world, and usually the questions we ask is, "Are you having hot flashes? Are you having sweats?" And some women come and say, "It's been fantastic. I've gone through the whole of menopause without any symptoms at all." And indeed, that's how we've been taught as doctors. If you don't have symptoms, leave it alone. And yes, we now talk about bone protection as a possibility, but we don't do any testing. We don't do any blood testing. In the last 10 or 12 years of doing longevity medicine, we've now begun to realize that the hormones are effectively the conductor of an orchestra of all your DNA. And they're literally highways that allow things to talk to each other. So when I now speak to my patients, I ask beyond those particular symptoms. I ask about how they were when they were early in their lives. How was university? How was relationships? How was work? And soon you build a pattern of those who are living in the fast lane and more at risk of depleting their hormones. Because when the real energy, the natural mitochondrial energy runs out, it could be that the body will steal these hormones. And it's subtle, a little bit of fogginess, a little bit of concentration issues, a little bit more irritability. And usually these are successful individuals. So they can mitigate against those symptoms with other things externally, or at least explain them. Well, I've got lots of children, I've got work, I'm balancing lots. Yes, you are, but you're still running on fuel. And so what I do is I kind of open up the chapter to saying, you don't have to have any symptom. You don't have to be suboptimal. And then when that happens, we can start picking up pictures of what may have happened in terms of even trauma in early childhood, a difficult job, insomnia, difficult children's. There's so many factors that will decline your hormones prematurely. And having done that, we then do the testing. But the testing is just reinforcing what the patient's telling me. Usually, you pick up a picture very quickly. And then what I do is I try and explain to them that the hormones are almost like nutrition. It's like taking food or vitamins. It's just that we, in our sort of world we live in, are able to now manufacture these in a bioidentical way. So if you are in the slow lane and you need to be in the middle lane, we can put you in the middle lane. It's a bit like, if you're a car, a Ferrari that's traveling in the fast lane all the time, you could put more petrol in it. It's the same with hormones. You're going to need to just look at where you're going to be fueling yourself correctly. And soon they understand that. There's also risk. People worry about breast cancer and the risk with hormones. Imbalance of hormones causes problems, just like imbalance everything else in life causes problems. So the idea about giving bespoke treatment to an individual in context of their lives is making sure that we give them the right hormones to keep them in that middle lane. And guess what? When you do balance the body's energies, it sorts itself out. You only have to make one or two tweaks and everything else falls into play. Sleep improves, cognitive function improves. Your ability to exercise improves, your relationships improve. So the body finds balance once you get those highways sorted out.
It sounds like we can actually prepare for this even before perimenopause. I mean, this
Absolutely.
is a
Yes.
lifelong work.
Yes, it is. You can prepare it from the age of 18 or 19 just through awareness. And I'm not saying restore your hormones at 18 or 19. I'm just saying be mindful that there is a significance in being anxious or not sleeping or being in a position where you're not in the greatest place physically or mentally. There are significances to this. And if you're aware of them, you can take steps to improve them. So it is not just about the endpoint. And you started this by saying, how can we meet menopause in a better way? Well, we don't need to meet it. We can actually mitigate against it. And we're not looking at fertility. We're looking at all the 100 other signals and receptors that exist that rely on hormones. So disease, decline, and disrepair are not natural consequences of aging if we can mitigate against them.
And this is what I love about speaking to you because the menopause conversation isn't about decline.
No.
This is about an invitation for you to become the strongest, most vital person you can be.
Yes.
And where would that start? So before, I mean, I guess before we look at hormones and things like that, I think hormones get blamed for a lot in midlife. I mean, even I was at my menopause expert an appointment recently, and I was like, this is happening, but is that hormones or is that just life? Or is it
Yes.
because I'm on my computer too much without the right glasses? You are very clear that it's not always hormones that's going on. What else is going on? What are you looking for? Because a lot of your practice is root cause analysis.
Yes. Yes. Ultimately, if we're going to really help people, people need to understand what they're trying to do. And having done this time and time and over again, my root cause bit has first of all fixed the cell's environment, feed this place where your cells are made, and defend it. And effectively, if the cells are good, then the tissues and organs they make will be good. So that was my starting point. But there was even a more important starting point to that. Every movement requires energy. A cell to be produced requires energy. And if we can look at energy medicine in a much more different way than we are now, we could potentially find out where the problems lies. Now, what do I mean by energy medicine? Everything that happens in your body requires an energy. And there is only one real pure form of energy called ATP. It's made by your 30 trillion batteries called mitochondria. And this energy makes your cells breathe. Now, we are so sophisticated that if we were busy in that fast lane, either from childhood, lots of exams, lots of sport, constantly excelling in the outside world, we're in the fast lane. And if we don't fuel up properly, a car would stop. But you won't stop. The body will borrow from another source of energy. And often it's the immune system, first of all. It'll steal from the immune system, which is why when people they're working hard, they get more infections or they're more prone to certain viruses.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
and then once the immune system hits a little bit low, the body still won't give up. It'll steal your hormones, and in women, it steals something called DHEA. So cholesterol is where all your sex hormones come from. So we vilified cholesterol, but actually, it's quite an important thing. Cholesterol makes something called pregnenolone. Pregnenolone makes something called DHEA, and then you get a cascade of all your hormones after that. Now, DHA is very clever because it looks to the brain, asks for permission to do its day job. But if the brain says, you know what, she's super stressed, why don't you go and help the cortisol gland out? So the DHEA can be utilized to support the cortisol gland. Now, it's fine if there's a saber-toothed tiger running after you or finding food, water, shelter. But what if your life was a constant state of mini saber-toothed tigers? Your DHEA would be shifting down the wrong road. And not by accident, but that's what was needed. So, of course, the downstream testosterone will drop. That's when women get a bit fatigued. They can't lose weight. They can't put on muscle mass. They get foggy. They get irritable. And so, of course, it's almost like the fast lane on the M25 being out of circuit, which means the other lanes will get congested. The other hormone that is stolen is progesterone. Now, we always talk about estrogen, but progesterone is a mammoth hormone. It is so powerful. It reduces fluid retention, it stops PMT, it stops fogginess, it mitigates against breast cancer, and many other things. There's about 100 receptors to progesterone in the body. Now, if the body, if the adrenal gland borrows this and you get progesterone depleted, your estrogen compared to your progesterone is dominant. Now, we know that estrogen dominance causes endometriosis, it causes breast cancer, it causes other things. So, effectively, when we talk about hormones being bad, it's the balance that's the issue. And this is why stress, if you look at breast cancer, 2 years before breast cancer, a lot of women have had super stress on their plate. And I suspect it's the estrogen dominance linked to the progesterone steal. And yet we don't think about it. So effectively, hormones are used as energy if you are requiring it. And so if you're in the fast lane a lot, there's a high likelihood that these hormones will start depleting and things will start going wrong. And then it's a vicious circle because you've knocked out another couple of lanes on the M25. So there's a traffic jam. And that's when you start finding it hard to lose weight. You find it hard to sleep. You get a bit more ratty. And again, you can put it down to a million and one things in the outside world, but all it is about balance. Now, the body still won't give up once those are down. It'll start putting you into adrenal mode all the time. And initially, you'll be wired and be able to cope, but then soon you'll get adrenally tired and fatigued and flat. And then it still doesn't give up. It goes to your rest and digest system, your vagus nerve, which is supposed to be there to calm everything down, but it can be brought into frontline battle. And then you'll see things like MCAS or POTS or various autonomic things. And then when you go and see the doctors, they say, well, we can't explain all of this. Well, actually, you're operating on the wrong energy. That's the problem. So far away from your mitochondria. And then, of course, there's havoc. When you don't get the right energy, things start going wrong. The liver can't work properly, the heart can't work properly, your joints can't work properly. That's when we see diseases.
So this is like the traffic jam you're talking about.
Totally.
Like if you're not aware or mindful, or the earlier you can be aware or mindful of what's going on in your life and all the different things that are impacting the different energy systems in your
Yes.
body,
Yes.
then you can try to bring all of those things
Yes.
into
And
balance.
that's the job we do. We simply get people out of ITU and get them into a rehabilitative process and get them switched onto the right energy. And once that happens, the body refuels it so many ways. Your psychology gets better, your physicality gets better. So everything happens everywhere at the same time. So it's not about looking at fixing one thing. We have 126,000 diseases. They all come from the same spot. So if we can fix that spot, we get better everywhere.
And when you say that same spot, what do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is that everything comes from a process called inflammation, and inflammation comes from operating the wrong energy.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? It's that
It's
simple.
that simple.
Because I know everybody's talking about inflammation a lot, but
Yeah.
then I'm like, okay, well, how do you bring that inflammation into control?
Yeah. Inflammation is a protesting sign by the body. Convention's been very good at looking at endpoint. So blood pressure, cholesterol, skin disorders, colitis, arthritis are all inflammation expressed at the organ level. What I'm talking about is looking at inflammation that's at the cellular level. Now, inflammation at the cellular level can show up in much more subtle ways. Much more subtle ways. The odd little niggle symptom here or a little niggle symptom there, but it's us trying to understand where it's coming from. Now, once we know that that's where all disease, decline, and disorder comes from, then let's start mitigating it in it before symptoms develop.
So you were talking about hormone balance
Mm.
or just balance in general, but let's talk about hormone balance. Do you think it's useful for women to start having their hormones checked like from the age of 18 or 19 and have them checked every few years so they know what normal is for them?
Yes, I think this is the thing. We have to remember that hormones are dynamic, they change throughout the month. And if you are wanting to know where you stand, then it is sensible to do a proper test to check where all your hormones are because hormones aren't just about estrogen, as we said. They're progesterone, they're DHEA, they're melatonin, they're cortisol. And because these processes are happening inside you invisibly at those early stages, then those are great biomarkers for you to understand. And then also put it into context with what's going on in your life. So if you're doing a lot of sport as an older teenager and schooling, you've got to understand that are you being fueled correctly? And if you're not being fueled correctly, what do you do about it? Well, it's not just about restoration hormones. It's about getting your gut sorted, getting your liver sorted, getting your sleep sorted so that you can stay in that fast lane.
And the whisper of that you're out of balance could come in many ways, and also it could be different for some people, right? Like,
Totally.
sometimes I look at kids, teenagers, and I'm like, "How come that kid can play the piano, play the guitar, play 4 different sports, and still get amazing grades?" And then some kids are like, "I'm tired."
Yes,
And I
exactly.
guess that's just a reflection of different people manage their
Well,
energies in different ways?
yes, and what you have to remember is that listen to that child who's tired, because in the outside world, it may appear that they're not doing very much. So why should they be tired? And this is what I believe that a lot of the energy depletion happens in the subconscious mind, not in the conscious mind, not in the 5% that you can see, but in the 95% you cannot. We harbor trauma there from early childhood, from even in utero. And we now know about generational lineage traumas too. So when you get these individuals who are not functioning, despite the fact that objectivity suggests that they should be, we need to think much more hard about what's going on in them that they're not even aware of. So the first thing I would do, therefore, is to do some preliminary tests to see if there are depletions that suggest there's energy being used up, going nowhere. It's like having a car on in a garage, not moving. That's what's happening to these individuals. They're doing an internal marathon that you cannot see. So things like ME, post-viral fatigue, we now blame these labels, but actually it was wrong energy, wrong place because of something that's happened that even you and I don't know about.
Now, we use the word energy. I don't want energy to seem really woo-woo here.
Yeah.
How can we could you just break that down? Like, so, okay, so you get a doctor says you're, somebody comes to see you and we're not using our energy right, or we're low on certain energy. What are you seeing in labs? Is that low
So
in certain minerals
yeah, so
or
what you would see, I mean, ultimately it's mitochondrial fatigue.
okay.
Okay. But what you would see in the labs is maybe micronutritional depletions, low iron, low vitamin D, low B12. You'll see inflammation in the gut. You may not pick up signs in the liver, but if the gut's inflamed, then the poor liver's having to pick up the pieces. So you can assume that's happening too. And then you relate it to history. These guys sometimes get to sleep quickly, but then wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning with their cortisols running crazy. And then they're tired all day because they're not waking up with the right sort of hormonal balances. So the history is probably the best place to start. And not just history about what's happening now, it's how were they born? Did mum have antibiotics? Did they have antibiotics? How was school? How was nursery, et cetera, et cetera? And you soon pick up a picture and find out what was going on in parents and grandparents. Because, as I said, epigenetics, the environment where your genes are surrounded by, can carry through generations too.
And
So,
I think, what I'm picturing right now when you were saying how the body then, when DHEA goes, "What do you want me to do today?"
yeah,
And
yeah,
it says, "Okay, well, you gotta go deal with cortisol, like, go deal
yeah,
with the adrenal gland." That's probably why we see so many women that we think are high performing, but they're really exhausted.
Yes. And I think this is a really good analogy. High performing in the outside world, in the material world. But, it's almost like they've transferred the energy asset externally from within. So, they've given it out, but at a cost of an internal issue. Um, and it can stay invisible for decades until a crash happens, but you can pick it up in behavior patterns, you see. And often with these, one sort of defers all their gratification to the external success because that's what defines them. But internally, they can be quite empty.
Yeah. I want to take a quick break now. And when we're back, Dr. Ash Kapoor is going to tell us how we can build a body to handle menopause.
I got a good, good feeling.
Now we're gonna move on to the foundations, like, what can we do to prepare our body? So we now know that it's not just down to hormones. There's a lot of the foundations that we need to get
Yeah.
right so that our hormones can actually work properly. You mentioned highways, so that if the highways are clear, then I think the hormones can flow and everything else probably along with it.
Yeah.
So in your work, you talk about restoring the highways of the body. So what does that actually mean?
Okay.
And how can we build a body that can handle menopause?
Okay. So I guess the first thing to say here is we need to define what good looks like. It's very subjective. And what we say what good looks like is to be purposeful, to be independent, and to be pursuing fulfillment. Those are the three keys that you're optimally living. And now we can now even define an age. And we could say up to 120. So if you're not living purposely, independently, and pursuing fulfillment till 120, you are suboptimal.
So you think we can live until 120 years old?
Based on that definition, yes. Not
Okay.
exist, but live. And that's very
Okay.
important. Existing is not the same as living. Living is those three things that I mentioned. So absolutely. So if we know that, that is our aspiration, that is our possibility, by definition, we are all suboptimal. And that's what I say to my patients, that you might feel great, but are you truly reached to where you should be? And a lot of them don't have symptoms. They won't feel, bad. But ultimately, if that's where we're heading, then we're not there yet. So I say to them, well, how do you ensure that you are in some way able to get there? And the first thing is look at the environment you're growing up in. Assume it is toxic from the minute you're born, because too much light, too much stress, too much heavy metal inhalation. Soil is no longer the same as it used to be. Water is no longer the same as it. We are toxic from day one. So we have to make that assumption that we're toxic from day one with invisible intruders, by the way, because you're not going to see them. And often we aspire to these intruders because we all love living in busy cities. So I start by saying that. The second thing I say is that the environment we're growing up in is so disparate to where our genes are. Our genes take hundreds of thousands of years to evolve. We spent millions of years in the savannas and the wilderness, only a few hundred years in this new environment. So your genes are in a state of distress from the minute they come into this world
Too much
because
stimulus?
too much stimulus and the wrong stimulus, you see? So, because they've grown up in nature and they only want to be sort of working harder when there's saber-tooth tigers, food, water, shelter issues, not what we're doing every single day. So, we're living in an environment that's toxic. And food is no longer nutrition, by the way, because we can have everything we want all the time. We live in abundance, but we're built for scarcity. So we're not feeding ourselves properly, and we're not defending ourselves properly. So that's the starting point in good health. So once we start this, I say, right, in order for us to mitigate against these things, we have to go back to basics and defend our body. So the first and most important defense in our body is our small intestine, our gut, not the colon, not the stomach, but the bit in the middle, 30 feet, 300 feet in surface area, 1 millimeter thin, and harbors over 25 trillion bacteria. That's your ecosystem. And because of this distress, that's breaking down. So, first of all, we've got to clean that place out, take away the debris that's built up. And we use herbs from Australia to achieve this, and then rebuild that wall that's breaking down. We call it leaky gut. And why it's important to rebuild that wall is that wall is letting in further toxins, and our poor liver's having to pick up the pieces. So our liver's got a waiting list because the gut's not doing its job. And that's 70% of your immune system.
In the
70%
gut.
in the gut. So starting point of defense is get your gut fixed. Once the gut's sealed, The liver doesn't have any more toxins coming in, it has a chance to empty out. But we also support that with things like glutathione. It's a fantastic antioxidant that helps filter the liver. Now, if you can think about it, a congested road means that side roads can't get in. So by detoxing the liver, we can start emptying out our brain, our muscles, our joints of all this debris. If we can't, it stays there and potentially is the cause of the disease that we have got today.
And how do you empty this out? You keep talking about emptying out.
So,
So, and detox, there's a lot of
practically,
noise
yeah,
around
yeah.
detox. Yeah.
Practically speaking, we basically use herbs from Australia that will purge the small intestine of all this debris. It takes about 7 weeks to do. You take this liquid in the morning, and next day you'll go and you'll empty 2, 3 times your normal volume. And this will keep going on and on every single day. And you'll see different colors, and some people even see parasites, because there's so much going on in that space. So, this is about detoxing and emptying out the small intestine. It's strategy one. And only when you detox it or remove, it's almost like removing wallpaper off a wall. Then you can see the bricks and mortar. There's no point taking fancy probiotics if you can't actually get there. Once you see the bricks and mortar, then the plasterer can come in and fix it. And we use peptides for that. And we use pre-pro postbiotics for that. So that's what I mean by the gut. With the liver, it's glutathione. And we can do that simultaneously. Now, and now, of course, the liver is your second gut. So it's actually still working on the gut. And then there's a third detox, but we don't do the third detox just yet. I'll explain why. And then we start looking at building your highways up. Now, for me, the pillars of your highways are the hormones, vitamin D hormone and the sex hormones that we've described earlier, but also iron and B12. These are superheroes that if you don't have those, you're not going to function. So we, in the first several weeks, start building those up at the same time as emptying out. It's almost like clearing a city of its junk and starting to build the roads. And then we do a final detox, which is the fuel to inflammation. We said inflammation was the name given to all processes that are going wrong. It's fueled by an energy, and that's called glycogen, sugar, stored sugar. You and I have hundreds of Mars bars stored in our system, which can be brought into action. So what we do is we empty that larder out. And the way we do that is by stop feeding the front of the larder, I stop eating, fasting, and allow the body to start emptying out these Mars bars as a form of nutrition. So that's larder number one that will empty after a period of fasting. But
I
then,
love your analogy there, by the way. Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
because I think that's really nice for everybody listening. You have this idea of we keep putting food in the fridge, but we're
yeah,
not eating the
we're not eating
food
the food at the
at the
back.
back of the
Yeah,
fridge.
because
So you can fast. Like some people find it
absolutely,
really hard for a day or 2 days, but actually you have a lot of stores. Like you
you
said, you have a
do.
lot of Mars bars in
You have a
there.
lot of Mars bars, and that's only one of your larders. Then the body will then shift into a second larder, and this is the most powerful larder. You and I make 4 million cells every 1 second. The old dead debris doesn't go, it gets put into all your other cells as scattered dead protein. And this scattered dead protein is just expanding and expanding and expanding. And in fact, when you stop eating, having finished the sugar first, it will go in and sweep up this dead protein and recycle it into brand new DNA and mitochondrial energy. So it's literally the only process in the world that can create clean, high level fuel.
And you can only do that through fasting?
You could do is the most effective way through
Yeah.
fasting. Yeah.
Wow.
And so, but you have to empty the sugar out before you get to the protein debris because the brain will go for the high energy, quick win first. And this process is called autophagy. Professor Usumi won the Nobel Prize in 2016 having discovered it. And let's face it, it's not new, right? There's Lent, there's Ramadan, there's Jainism fasting. We've been fasting for thousands of years. We've always known it causes clarity, but now we know the science behind that clarity. It goes further than Socrates, who never took to a student on until they'd fasted for a period of time. So emptying out this dead debris is like emptying out a steak at the back of your fridge that's been sitting there for 20 years. You can imagine what it looks like.
Yeah.
So
Wouldn't taste very good either, actually,
having
that
cleaned
steak.
that, then the body will start biohacking fat. And it will find fat around all your organs, take it and make your needs immediately from it. So you can lose weight or lose fat watching television. And the beauty of this is that your brain is made of fat. So your brain will get fed before your body does, and your brain will stabilize something called dopamine. So you won't feel those hunger pangs or cravings anymore. You'll feel zen-like. So this is why people think, why am I sleeping so well? Why have I got such clarity in my head? It's saying, well, you're actually feeding your brain properly rather than on sugar. And of course, the adrenal gland doesn't have the fuel to work with anymore.
And how much time are you talking here in terms of
Oh,
fasting? Does that
very, I mean, basically, fasting is very precise. We do your body comp index and we work out how much is in each of your larders and we vary the fast accordingly. But on average, it would be 2 to 3 days without food and then a further 5 to 7 to 10 days of 1 meal a day of plant food because the plant food is not about nutrition, it's about keeping your gut moving. And most autophagies complete by day 9. Now, we have to be careful with cyclical women because interestingly, they're built with a predisposition that in the second half of the cycle, the body says, I'm not giving you the sugar. It's not for you, it's for a potential baby. So rather than say women should fast, what I say they should fast in a smart way in the first 10 days of their cycle because they were still under the same pressures as men were thousands of years ago because we are designed for autophagy, by the way, because there was no food all the time. And that's where our genes are still. So having emptied the sugar and the protein debris, we almost clean out the potential diseases that could happen later in the future. But of course, we don't see that. We eat 3 meals a day. We have got larders that are growing and growing and growing. We've got livers that are toxic. We've got guts that are broken. And how do we manage it? We take more drugs, which are more toxic. So, of course, by 70, 80, we're in decline. We don't have to be. Just look at Aborigines, look at Maasai's. Yes, they have other challenges, communicable diseases, but very few have chronic diseases. Most 80-year-olds can still squat and eat on the floor. They've still got all their teeth. So, we've got to learn from indigenous wisdom. We've got to learn where our genes are most comfortable and mitigate against the risks.
I think the other thing I'm hearing you say, though, is that there isn't a silver bullet, right?
No,
Now, you're explaining a protocol or a process, but this isn't something that's going to take 3 years.
no,
I mean,
goodness, no,
how
no, no, no.
long? How
So,
long?
so for me, the gut and liver detox is 6 or 7 weeks. The fast is 10 days. By then, you're 80% there. Then what do we do? Well, you can only clean something when you can see what you're cleaning. So, having cleaned out all the debris, we can see the walls of all your cells, and we then go into repair mode. And what is repair? Well, we live in the modern world. There's only one thing to repair. That's your rest and digest, your vagus nerve, the opposite to your sympathetic fight or flight. So we wake up your vagus nerve by protecting and repairing your gut, probiotics that can actually get there now, and peptides. The plaster comes in and seals the wall, and sleep. Now, sleep is so powerful. Sleep is probably the one thing that will allow your body to clean out properly. But most of us don't sleep very well because of our cortisol levels being too high. And cortisol is a monster compared to melatonin. So if you have that 2 a.m. wake up call, it's because you've got tabs open at the back of your head that you haven't addressed. So what we do is work on sleep and we use adaptogenics, put the brakes on cortisol, ashwagandha, rhodiola. We also use magnesium and also use melatonin, a very powerful hormone. And it's made by your pineal gland, your longevity gland of interest. So it's quite interesting. And then having got your rest and digest working, the body goes into balance and starts looking after itself. So this is not something you're going to have to be reliant on forever. You'll develop intuition. You'll develop things that are good for you, and you'll start mitigating against things that are bad for you naturally. You don't have to even work hard at it at that point. You're pressing Control Alt Delete on a whole lifetime behavior.
Well, the other thing I love about sleep and what you're saying is we had actually, it was a nutritionist that was on the show, and she was talking about your circadian rhythm. But, there are only two signals really that your body has. It's kind of day
And
and
night,
night, and then
yes.
there's the food you put in and what time.
Absolutely right.
And
Yes.
what I'm hearing you say is when you can get those things under control, then your body has a system it can rely on
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
and then the sleep will come because it
Yes.
knows that
It
you're going to
knows.
give it. It's almost like when you have a baby. For anybody who's had a child,
Yes.
right? The baby cries, you feed like they kind of if you have a baby on a routine,
Yes.
then they feel very safe
Yes.
because they know
Exactly.
exactly when their next meal is going to come. Or an animal,
100%.
I guess, might be the same. A
Absolutely.
pet
Yeah.
might be the same.
Yes. And you go into what they call flow. You're in sync with your body. You'll understand your body will give you signals one way or another. An example is, we've had patients who've had long fasts and they find that if they had a glass of wine, they just don't sleep anymore, but they're so addicted to that good energy, they don't do it. It's not because you have to force them not to have it. It's just that the body's now so clean, it will tell you what's good for it and what's not. So having got them to that stage, which is usually 2 to 3 months, in fact, 3 months, we then go to the fun stage of saying, where do you want to go now? And that's when people say, well, what's the next level? And that's when you can start transcending from the physical body into the conscious mind. And that's super powerful, where you can train your brain to think positively. You can train your brain to receive messages from the outside world and respond to them rather than react to them. In other words, you're changing your energies. So you then become a responder to 90% of things and a reactor to 10% rather than the opposite. So these people tend to be quite calm. They're nice to have around. They give a good aura. They calm things down just by virtue of being present, and we're all capable of that. And what then happens is people start letting go of things that they think are important and focusing on things that are truly important. But ultimately, they become more community beings. They become more in love with nature. They crave nature, and it doesn't have to be forced upon them. They just do it, and they become less consumeristic.
We were talking before the show started, though. You had said, your body craves what it needs. And I have so many, myself included, but I've had other friends who've been like, God, I really need to go out for a walk in nature. I really need to go to the countryside.
Yes.
My daughter, even right now, is asking to go visit
Isn't
some
that
friends who
amazing?
live in the countryside. She's like,
Yeah.
can we go see can we go see X and Y? I really want to see them. But what I know is that there's too much stimulus in the city and she
Yes.
needs to get out and
So
into the
that's so
country.
interesting you say that because that's exactly the point. You know, uh, Initially people get excited about the city and the adrenaline, etc. But once you get into balance, you don't want it anymore. You also choose your friends very carefully. You like solitude. Solitude and loneliness are two different things. You try and you speak to yourself. There's more of an internal dialogue. I was surprised to hear that a large proportion of the population don't have an internal dialogue. That's how frightening it is. They've delegated dialogue to the outside world.
Now, when you say internal dialogue, what do you mean?
It almost means like reflecting on yourself, talking to yourself, and saying, you know, why is my hand hurting? Why did I not sleep? Why did that conversation wire me so much? What was it about the conversation or about me? So those sort of internal dialogues then start enabling the brain to get what they call neuroplasticity and rationalizing it and letting go. We don't let go, we compartmentalize and we hide.
Yeah, like, there's no reflection. People are not taking time to sit
No,
and
no,
reflect.
no, because they feel they don't want to miss out. If they're not, this is the big thing. They need to be everywhere because they don't want to miss out. They feel inferior because they're chasing the wrong success. And why I know this, I've interviewed and looked after a number of patients who are very wealthy, have everything from the outside perspective, but have chosen to give it up for inner energy. A lot of them have become healers, a lot of them become philanthropists. And you think to yourself, you've gone around the whole journey to go back to simplicity. So there's a lesson to be learned there somewhere.
I have a question. This is completely gonna be a little off kilter, but you talked about Mars bars.
Yes.
But you also have, I'm gonna go back to cortisol and
Glycogen.
glycogen, because you also said the one other watch out I want everybody to know about stress, which we talked about a few minutes ago, though, was you said that even just thinking about being stressed, you have, like, this internal donut factory. I
Yes,
mean, I
totally.
loved how you
Yeah.
said that
Yes.
because I'm like, "Oh my god,
Yes.
I've had a donut factory
Yeah.
running in the
So
backside."
so this is the thing. We always feel it's because we're eating too much or not exercising enough. But what we've got to remember is the fight or flight has a duty of care to protect you. And remember, we're still in the savannas and the wilderness. So the brain only perceives protection from physical stresses. So it steps your game up to be physically strong. So it creates through the adrenal pathway, through the cortisol, sugar. And why? Not just sugar, but adrenaline, epinephrine, all the things that step your game up. It gets you ready to fight or flight. And of course, we don't because it's an email or a difficult telephone call or a difficult Instagram or whatever. So, of course, this extra sugar sits around saying, I'm here for you, but you're not doing anything with it. Well, I'm gonna suppose I'm just gonna have to create fat from it. So it converts from the sugar to the fat. So hence when we see lots of fat around our organs, it's not about bad eating, it's about bad thinking. You can make 10 donuts a day through stress. And if you're not stressed, you can eat three and still lose weight.
I mean,
So
I think that's a great it's just a great picture for people to have in their mind,
yes.
if you needed any incentive for
Uh,
finding a way to
Yeah, and think
relieve your
think
stress.
about it. If you what's comfort eating? When we're stressed, we crave carb, and we often justify saying, "Well, I've had a bad day, so it's okay for me to have extra few glasses of wine and a bit of extra sweet." But in nature itself, that stress was no food. was wanting water, shelter. So we didn't have the privilege of having that around. And that's why the body was able to step its game up, you see. So we are built for that. We're designed to bring in sugar from within us to find the sugar from outside. What we're doing though is we've got plenty of sugar outside. And caveman would have done the same, but he didn't have that privilege.
No, and we have it all stored, but we keep putting more in as
Exactly.
well.
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about nutrition, we've talked about sleep. What about movement?
Okay. Movement is incredibly powerful. What we have to be mindful of, though, is that when our systems are not quite where they should be, when the pathways are not working, we're not producing the right hormones, we're not operating on the right energy. The ability to exercise and stay active, the motivation is not there. So we mustn't be too hard on these individuals. And I always say that it's not a mindset. You don't have lack of willpower. You're just in a state of disrepair. So, but you will get there. So I believe what we still have to fix the gut, the liver, etc., so that people are they're ready to optimize with movement. Now, why is movement important? Again, back to indigenous wisdom. We're not meant to sit. Sitting is the new cancer, effectively. By sitting, we're not moving our spine, we're not moving anything. And our immune system requires vibration. So, for example, when we jump, our vertebral columns release a hormone called calcitonin, which initiates the immune system. So, we are built to move. We're not built to sit on chairs. We're moving from A to B to C. It doesn't have to be gyms, just a bit of activity every single day. Um, but again, as I said, I'm mindful that when people are stuck, it's hard for them to make that shift or be motivated to make that shift. So we still have to fix the foundation so they can get to that position to keep moving. And that's really important, whether it's to prevent bone loss, whether it's to prevent cancers, whether it's to keep an active brain movement. It's linked to blood flow,
Yeah,
everything.
I was listening to another, interview you did where you said, again, our ancestors, would have been walking for 12 hours a day,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
on average, people are sitting
For
15
12 to
hours a
15
day.
hours a day now, that's right, yes. Whether it's in the office or watching Netflix, that's the state of play, you see, and
And
we're
then
stagnating.
and we can just, set that that's why I love those Fitbits. They used to
Yes.
vibrate and say,
Yes.
"It's time for you to
Tell
get up
me,
and walk
yeah,
around."
yeah, yeah.
So there is a useful. Where does hormone, replacement therapy come into this for you?
So for me, I don't see hormone restoration therapy as an age-related phenomenon. I see um, I see hormones can be declining at such an early age. Now, it doesn't mean that we just go to hormones. We fix the things around them so the hormones work first, particularly in the younger group. So for me, if there is PMT in a teenager, and they're trying everything to get it right, but it's a very difficult age. I would give them some progesterone in the just before their period because that's why they're getting PMT. If they don't get PMT, they have a better week. If they have a better week, they're more calmer, they're more resilient, they feel better about themselves. So you can change that cycle. It doesn't mean they have to be on it forever, but we've got to remember that these hormones start declining much sooner than we think. I've seen men with low testosterone in their 20s now. It's again been stolen. So for me, the journey of hormones is a lifelong journey. And I feel it should be part of most testing when people come in with symptoms or they're suboptimal in any way. As to how I deal with it is determined by, how old they are, what their value system is. We work with nutrition, we work with lots of things. But it's not if I tell someone if you sleep better, if you wake up in a positive way, and if you eat your fresh vegetables and food and don't get so stressed, your hormones will be fine. That's not going to be received very well. What I say to these individuals is, you're in decline because your lanes are all blocked up. Let me open your lanes so we can have this conversation again in 2 weeks when you'll be more of a receptor to it. And again, we mustn't be too hard on these individuals who are so stuck that the advice we give almost sounds sort of patronizing. And I think that's really important that these people don't want to be where they are. And we often judge them from where we are looking at it. And I think that's one of the faults of the medical profession that we seem to blame people for not having willpower, and it's wrong because
Yeah.
everyone wants to be fixed.
And I think sometimes, the hormone replacement therapy is a way just to stabilize so
Yeah,
that they then can eat better
that's
and then
it.
wanna start moving
Exactly.
their body.
And now we have a lot of women in, working as well as looking after families, in very, powerful and important positions. And I feel that they're carrying a lot more than their male contemporaries because they have to deal with multiple things. And again, these groups need to not just accept a bit of fogginess, a bit of memory loss, a bit of poor sleep. they should have their hormones checked because if there is a shortfall and we can put them in the middle lane, we don't want to put them outside. We want to put them in the middle lane. So not only can they function at a better level, they can enjoy what they do. And again, when you enjoy what you do, flow comes into play. You make better decisions. So I think it's really important that we don't assume everything's due to the outside world.
And what I'm hearing you say, though, is you want to create an environment inside the body for all these things to flourish as the body should do
Totally.
naturally.
Absolutely.
In the modern world, we do need a few boosters
Yes. Yes.
sometimes.
Yes. Because again, we can't say, I want, I hear this thing, I want to do it naturally. I said, well, I get that, but you're not in nature.
You're not in
You're in
nature.
nurture. So with the best will in the world, unless you want to move out to the savannas, we can't do it naturally.
Yeah. Let's talk about the fast lane for a minute because peptides are having a moment.
Yes.
And I love how you describe them because I think they feel really super biohacky right now, but I've learned from you that they've been around since the 1900s
Yes.
and we get them in food normally.
Yeah.
So can you explain what a peptide is
Yes, of
first?
course. Yes. So peptides are not complicated. They're basically proteins, but they're like the smallest protein that we have is called an amino acid, and these amino acids come together and form little Lego pieces. And these Lego pieces, or what they call short chain amino acids, i.e., peptides, go and feed certain parts of the space where your cells are made. Now, going back to our original conversation, if we feed and defend the cell, we talked about defending it through cleaning the liver and the gut and getting good energy. But let's talk about feeding it. Well, the absolute food for this is peptides. So you have your eye requires a certain chain of amino acids. Your heart requires a certain chain of amino acids. And in 1904, Ivan Pavlov discovered two peptides without computers. And then in 1970s, the St. Petersburg University discovered a lot more through computers. And now we have thousands of peptides. Even the GLP-1s, the Monjaros, are actual peptides at low doses. They're just short chain amino acids that feed particular areas. Now, if we are able to feed our genes or regulate our genes through decent protein nutrition, then the cells will work well. So effectively, 100 million people have been treated around the world. There's not been a single side effect. And then you ask, well, why would there be a side effect to a protein that you're going to get from a chicken or a fish? Whatever you don't need, you pee out. So they are controversial because I suspect they're a big threat to the commercial pharmaceutical industries because, again, that's about suppression medicine. This is about fixing medicine. In fact, I just heard today that RFK has lifted the ban on 16 peptides in the US. They were taken off the market. Now they're back on the market
Oh,
again.
wow. Yeah.
So you can see that it's hard to fight logic these days. And so for me, peptides are literally efficient nutrition. And again, we wouldn't have to have this conversation 1,000 years ago. You'd make a kill of an animal, you'd eat it straight away. The nutrition, the protein was there for you to build your peptides, and you didn't have all the toxicity to deal with either.
Yeah. And how would you like how would you use them for menopause or women? I guess you would target a certain thing if it's
Yeah, so
brain
think of
fog
so
or
so if you think
muscle,
about it,
joint.
when you have hormonal depletion, it's usually due to the fact that the infrastructures around that area are not functioning properly, particularly the adrenal gland either working overtime or totally tired. So you'd give an adrenal peptide. You give an immune peptide like a thymus peptide. You give a pineal peptide, and you'll give a gut peptide. So you're effectively feeding around the hormones. So the brain says, adrenal gland, I want these back now. You can go and do your day job. So you can let go, and then the hormones can go and do their job again. And
I
then, of
mean,
course, you can feed the ovarian structure in those who are looking to have children. So you've got to remember, hormonal steel is infrastructure breakdown. So fix the infrastructure and the brain will let go. In 1955, Dr. McJeffries ran a fertility center. And he was giving hydrocortisone to women who couldn't have babies. And within X months, they were having babies. So he won the Nobel Prize, by the way. And what he was doing was giving what the adrenal gland was making, hydrocortisone. So by giving hydrocortisone to the adrenal gland, the brain says, oh, you're okay now. Let go of the progesterone, let go of the DHEA. Progesterone went out, they got pregnant.
wow.
Do you see the link between hormones and your general physiology?
Yes.
You can't, we don't work in silos.
And I love this. I mean, peptides to me feel like real precision
Totally
medicine,
precision. Yeah.
but they're not meant to be taken like all the time,
No,
right? It's
no.
it's not a
So,
lifetime
no.
of
So, like anything, you want your body to do its work. So, it's a bit like if the M25 had potholes in it and roadblocks, you'd bring in tarmac and concrete to fix them. But once it's fixed, you'd move out and let it get on with things and then come back for repair from time to time. So with peptides, we tend to cycle them for 3 months, then give a 6 month gap and then recycle them or shift around. I know some people that take oral supplements around every organ, 3 organs a year, and just circulate. And they're looking amazing, by the way. Um,
That's
so,
what we love.
yeah. So in oral form in the UK, they are seen as nutritional supplements and you can get them. In the injectable form, you cannot do them as treatment in the UK, but you can join research and development programs.
Yeah, there's a lot of new research on that. Well,
Yeah,
thank you for explaining that.
yeah,
For those of us that do live in big cities or are traveling all the time, what are some of the practices that you might introduce for women who need to regulate their nervous
yeah.
system?
So for me, I think again, we can't. We know where we should be, and we know where we are, and we just got to fix that balance. For me, anything we can do to help sleep is really important. That's the only switch off time people have. So take adaptogenics if you're in the fast lane, ashwagandha, rhodiola. Think about melatonin also. It's not just for jet lag and magnesium. So control your nighttime, control your rituals before going to sleep. Don't wire your brain by watching horror movies. Don't look at your phone, the usual things. But almost, and the other thing is breath work. Box breathing for about 3 or 4 minutes before to get your sympathetic nervous system balanced, then go to sleep. In the morning, it's about energy, the right energy. If you're waking up exhausted, it means that your cortisol gland's been working overtime and hasn't got the energy to give you in the morning. So, waking up the right energy requires giving you energy fuel. B12 or the methyl B vitamins, very, very important. Look at your hormones because often women are DHEA depleted or even a little bit of testosterone depletion can occur. So very much about energy. NMN is a precursor to ATP. So morning's about energy, evening's about putting the brakes on. And in the middle of the day, it's about clarity and food. So omega 369 and CoQ10 are a really nice addition.
And are these things that I mean, again, I think you're very much about a personalized approach. And once you can get your bloods tested, then you know.
Exactly how
And
much to
again,
give.
beyond testing sex hormones, there are
Totally.
so many other
Yes.
biomarkers
Yes.
that can help you feel your best.
Yes. And I'm of the belief that switch yourself on as much as you can and we'll fill in the gaps rather than just give everything because and it depends on where you are. Some people just they're frozen, so you need to thaw them out before they can move forwards. And there's not one size that fits all. We only work with what your body makes or what exists in nature, and you can't go wrong with that formula.
Things you've also talked about earlier, when we talked about peptides and ice dips and kind of the fast lane part of it, it also made me realize that everybody's also going at their own pace.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. There was a point where I was like all into the ice, and but my girlfriend was like, "Oh my God, I can't even dip my toe in."
Mm.
And it just made me she may not like it. A, that's fine. But B, also we could have just been in very two different places
Yeah.
physiologically,
Yeah.
mentally,
Yeah.
in order to be able to sustain
Yeah. And
that.
what you said is exactly right. So we use the term hormesis. Hormesis is short, sharp stresses, which are actually good for you, as opposed to chronic stress, which is bad for you. So, some stress can be good for you in certain ways, and long term, it's not. Now, when I speak to Suresh Rattan, who's the world expert on hormesis, he's been writing about it since 1970. Um, I asked him about my fasting programs, and it was interesting because I asked him the question, "What does he think about autophagy and fasting?" And he said to me, he only said a few words. He said, only if they want to. And I couldn't understand that. And later I did understand it because if I asked you to fast and immediately your brain triaged it, into, I'm going to feel dizzy, I'm going to faint, I might even have a heart attack. I saw someone having a problem with this. The brain will triage you into cortisol. It's not good for you. If you go into it thinking, this is going to be tough, but I'm going to be a better version of myself, you go into the right zone. So you've got to remember, people are not in the right energy zones
Yes,
for
I
this
mean,
sort of.
this is one a huge takeaway because I think even as women, we so want to help each other.
Okay.
We're all going through this transition at the same time, or we may be in different phases, but we're like, oh my gosh, you should try this, or have you
Yeah.
tried that, or have you tried
Yeah.
this? but we just have to be there for each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah.
And when people are ready, they'll ask
Yeah.
or they'll
Yeah.
be curious about something,
Yes,
but we're
exactly.
not all in it at the same time or need the same things.
100% correct.
Such a big part of it. I have learned so much. I could speak to you
Mhm.
forever. But one thing's for sure, you can prepare your body for a more positive menopause experience. I loved your analogy of clearing the highways and the pathways. And when you do that, then everything will work better. The supplements will work better. The probiotics will
Yes.
work better. The HRT will work better. Obviously, because your gut and liver will be functioning properly. I mean, this idea of kind of basically your body steals from Peter to pay Paul
Yes.
and draws from these different energy
Yeah.
sources.
Yeah.
I think of energy sometimes as just food or
Yeah.
nature. And I think this idea of, there you can put fuel in the tank, but if your battery is low,
Yeah.
that
That's
battery of
right.
energy,
Exactly.
then the car's gonna go nowhere,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Anyway, before we get into our final question, if any of this has resonated with anybody, please leave a comment here or at menopositive.life on Instagram. And if you love these conversations, we just want to keep bringing the world's leading experts to you so you can learn how to have a more positive menopause experience and that your second half can be just as exciting as your first. Now, Dr. Ash Kapoor, the final question we ask all of our guests, knowing what we know now about the menopause transition, what would you tell our 35-year-old listener?
I would say to our 35-year-old listener, they may feel well. They've probably had children by now, or they're thinking about having children. I would say get your hormones checked because there's a high likelihood that you'll be suboptimal. And by picking up these pieces at that age, you're going to be making life a lot easier moving forwards.
And it's not that anybody's doing anything wrong, is it? Like you
No,
said, it's all these environmental toxins. We're
yes,
probably being born into it now.
that's it.
And
It's
there's more coming in than our body can actually
exactly,
process.
exactly.
What would you tell our 45-year-old listener?
Our 45-year-old listener, I would say that they are capable of being 35. Simply again, by looking at their restorative journey, gut, liver, autophagy for removing the glycogen, and then restoring those little highways a little bit more. In other words, they can still remain at 35 moving forwards.
I love that. And what would you tell our 55-year-old listener?
They're only halfway through their journey. And I think again, I'm so pleased to see 70, 80-year-old women running businesses successfully, uh, almost running it with intuition. And there's something about an aura of intuition that's so calming to those around them. So I would say 55 is not where you should be looking at retiring. It should be where you should be at your most joyful, because by then you've also got the wisdom and experience to give the world. So to allow that to happen, keep your systems going.
Dr. Ash Kapoor, thank you so much for being part of the Menopositive
Lovely,
community.
lovely. Thank you very much.
And for everyone listening, how do you want to show up to one of the most important transitions of your life? Because I want your second half to be just as vital and exciting as your first. And I know you want that too. We'll see you next time.
I got a good, good feeling.